Welcome back to RGR. I'm Ryan, and this is me going rogue, all about the NFL and particularly the Kansas City Chiefs. It's been a really long week, so I'm shooting this one from the backyard because with travel delays and all that kind of stuff, just got back from camp less than 12 hours ago. I'm trying to work through the production schedule, and there's quite a bit going on. So if you're new around here and you like what you've seen over the last week with me and my guests, my co-hosts on the couple of videos, make sure you hit the subscribe button below, hit the notifications so you know when something new goes up, as well as, leave a thumbs up on this video if you like it or any of the others, and leave your comments most importantly. Now, the trip out to St. Joe was great. A lot of stuff going on there, and really what we saw is a progression through kind of the peak of, at least weather-wise, as well as intensity-wise, what the team was doing at practice and how they were going about their business. They got a lot of good things done. Tuesday particularly was just a heat index that really sent some of the players over the edge. A lot of things going on. You've heard on the podcast how the players were dealing with it. But despite that, one big takeaway was that they kept their momentum and they kept their intensity. I thought that practice overall for the week went very well, and that's good to hear on a number of levels, because there's plenty going on, plenty of guys trying to make this team, and that is what we're going to see on preseason game 2 against the Steelers. There's a lot of guys that have to make a point, make some hay, really try to get themselves onto this roster. And that's not the only thing. There is work to be done on the offense, the schematic differences on the defense, and the defense is still trying to learn its way around, and Steve Spagnuolo's been very clear about trying different combinations, trying different sets, trying to develop a better knowledge of what his players can do, and that's a breath of fresh air. I talked with Josh Briscoe on 810 WHB, and we spoke a little bit about just the fact that the philosophy of learning what your players do and then adapting the scheme to them is really the key that Spagnuolo brings over the last administration on defense. It's something that I'm really looking forward to. There's a lot to go on there. You can catch that over on the podcast channel or on WHB itself. So that said, we're talking today about the top 5 things for game 2. Really, before we even get into the top 5, the number one overall guiding concept is, despite having some matchups, they have to stay healthy. Health is the number one thing at this point. You want to emphasize getting your starters in a rhythm and finding out what you can develop about your backups. A lot of experimentation without taking too much risk. So injuries are the number one thing that we have to make sure go on. And there's a windstorm going on here. I hope you guys can hear that. Interesting day out in Colorado. But number 5 on the list, get Mahomes into a rhythm, get him progressing, maybe 2 to 3 series, and get him out of there. That doesn't necessarily go for the rest of the starters, but for the MVP himself, that's what has to happen. You want to make sure that you give him enough work that he can get into what he needs to do, and like I said, a rhythm, and that really is part of it. It's not something you want to stop and start. You want to give him a chance to get rolling a little bit. Saw a lot of interesting wrinkles this week with some empty sets, with some motion. The fact that they showed Mecole Hardman in motion last week on that jet action, I think, is a little bit more significant than we may have thought before. Showing that so early in the preseason actually sets you up to do it some more now, as well as add wrinkles on top of it come the regular season. So that said, maybe 2 series, at the most 3. Now, I know Andy Reid is going to say that they're going to get a quarter. I just don't see that. I don't think it's a risk that you need to take with the MVP. Maybe the linemen, again, you've got a starter new there in Wiley. You've got a new starter in Reeder, although both of them have played, just not in the spot that there are with the guys on either side of them and working as a unit. And a 5-man unit on the offensive line is what you have to have. So maybe you let those guys go a little deeper. Maybe they get a full quarter. Maybe you are platooning the skill players. A lot of expectations there, but for the MVP himself, get him his work and get him out of that game. Take 0 risks with him because he really is the franchise. You can say what you want about Chad Henne and the other quarterbacks, but he is the franchise at this point. So I don't expect him to play a whole ton. Number 4 on my list for preseason game 2 is Juan Thornhill himself, not just the safety situation, although that obviously plays into it. Thornhill came on and I thought played well in practice this week. You saw him mix in with the ones. He's been a steady progression. When camp first started, he was getting his hands on balls, getting some deflections, but not really coming home. Since then, this last week of practice has really come together for him. He's been able to get some of his picks, things that you've seen him do in the past. I think he's taking good cuts, and I think that's really the key to what Juan Thornhill has to do in this game. As we rolled through camp and watched some of the practices, we did see him take some shadow reps behind Dan Sorensen when he was in with the ones. They moved around. They kind of flip-flopped a lot, whether it was 9-on-7 or 11-on-11. They kind of moved around who was going to be with the starting group and who wasn't. I don't know that it's a big rush to get Juan Thornhill in with the starters. I think he will eventually. I think he will week 1, unless something goes disastrously wrong. But I don't know that it's a priority for week 2. So we're going to see what Steve Spagnuolo thinks. If he comes out and gets the start, great. Get those reps in with the guys that you're going to be on the field with, and get to attacking the opposition. I saw him take a couple of false steps this week, but really liked what he did in terms of recovering from that. I think his speed is really on display, and the more comfortable he gets, I think the more potential there is for him to be a Hawk early in the season rather than letting that develop all the way out. So want to see him get in there pretty regular. Now that said, we also saw Sorensen with the ones. He's definitely the third, and I think we saw the 3 safety sets with Thornhill at the back, Matthew in between, and Sorensen up towards the line of scrimmage, and that's perfect. That's what I've been talking about all offseason. Very interested to see how much Spagnuolo uses 3 safeties versus what we saw from Sutton. Certainly practicing it this early in the year gives you an indication that it is going to be on the table for usefulness, and I'll be interested to see just how much they do use it. The running back situation is another one. What we saw this week was Damian Williams return to practice, run with the ones all week long. A lot of statements in the press conferences about just how he is the starter. Dylan McCullough, Andy Reid, both intimated that he's the number 1. He's going to be the bell cow. How much they supplement is going to be the big question. And what we did see was a couple of hiccups out of Carlos Hyde this week in practice. I thought he ran okay last week. I'll actually get to see the game live this time, so I'll give you my thoughts as it goes on. Not 100% sold that he's all there in terms of explosiveness. And as the younger guys come on, we're going to have to see that kind of comparison. That may be what it comes down to. But in addition, Carlos had some practice issues this week with pass protection, and that's something that, even though it was against lower string defenders, you want to see more out of Darwin Thompson and certainly Darrel Williams. I'm really interested to see what the roles are for those 2 guys. Thompson has a lot of people fired up, and I think he showed you some good signs. Want to see that progress. Darrel Williams as well was basically the guy that came in after Hyde this week at practice. Does that continue in the game? I want to see some yardage gain, not just looks. What can those 2 guys, Darrel Williams and Darwin Thompson, produce? Because if they feel like they're progressing beyond what they needed, it puts Carlos Hyde at a position where maybe he doesn't make this roster, like we talked about early in OTAs when he wasn't even practicing. It's kind of a toss-up. They still have the Tremont Smith experiment going on at running back as well, so there's always that option too if you want him as a kick returner. I think that may put Carlos Hyde on the back burner. We're going to find out. We'll see how many snaps each of them get and what they're able to do with them this week against the Steelers. And remaining on the offensive side, the top 4 wide receivers are pretty set. The top 3 tight ends are pretty set. I don't know that you're going to see anything. The question will be whether they keep both Yelder and Bell as the backup tight ends or if they just go with one of them. But those guys are clearly entrenched as the backups. My boy John Lavender remains on the sidelines with a shoulder separation, and we saw some backward progression from him. Regression, if you want to call it. First day of practice, he was out there, didn't do anything, of course, but didn't have any noticeable signs. The second and third day I was at camp, he was in a sling, definitely trying to isolate and immobilize that particular shoulder, let him try to heal. Have had no update on his injury, so we'll see what happens with him. But the top 3 tight ends are set, in my opinion. We'll see how many they keep. Same thing with the top 4 wide receivers. Demarcus Robinson is making this team clearly. Mecole Hardman, and he will share that third role. Be there for any injuries and that kind of thing. And that brings you down to, we saw a good week of practice out of Kemp. And I think he's got to the point where between his special team skill and what he's able to do on the offense, it's beginning to creep up. I think he's now pretty much a lock as well. So the question is, Is there room for him to be the fifth, or is he really the sixth receiver that's still going to be mainly on special teams? Is there a fifth guy that can creep above him and actually get into the offense? Guys like Pringle, guys like Rashad Davis, who can do that? And this game is going to go a long way because both those guys are down the depth chart. That preseason game number 2 is going to be a big step for them. They're going to get touches. They're going to get looks. What can they do with them? So keep an eye out on that. I will be watching those two guys as the front runners to make the roster at this point. And the number one thing that I'm looking for in preseason game number 2 against the Steelers is the play of the cornerbacks. Now, Kendall Fuller's had a rough go, and we've heard that he's, quote-unquote, tweaked something. The coaching staff seems to be playing along with that and comfortable with it. I think he actually improved a little bit this week during practice, and we'll see how he does in this particular game. Now, the other two starters have been diametrically opposed. Charvarius Ward has been very quiet. He's been beaten with some speed. He's been beaten on some comeback routes this week in practice, but overall I thought was solid. Not spectacular, but solid. We'll see him continue to play. And Bashaud Breeland really had a week. I think we tallied 4 interceptions for him this week. Really made some nice plays, was in position, combating both routes and for the ball, and I thought that was a really good sign. See him kind of step up, and I think if they can continue to see that kind of momentum, he's going to be a big boon, more so than most have thought to this point in the offseason. So the question becomes, who can fill in beyond that? Who's going to be the number 4? We haven't seen Mo Claiborne yet. We're not expecting to against the Steelers, but we should afterwards. He looks to be putting in a lot of work with both Dave Merritt and Sam Madison. Did a lot of post-practice work on the field by himself, a lot of instruction from those guys trying to get the scheme down. I think that's really going to be key for him, and it'll also be key to how soon we see him. Beyond him, what can Fields do? How much input can he have? Rashad Fenton looked like he's getting some backup nickel snaps. I think that's important for him. That's probably the role that he's going to play. We want to see them play well. We want to see what they can do in terms of PBUs, interceptions, and make sure that they're in good position. So that's the position group I'll be watching. Top priority for me this particular preseason game. I want to know what you think. Let me know down in the comments, what are you looking for? Anything in particular in terms of position or individuals? I'll be back post-game. We'll do a podcast. We're going to get back on schedule. I'm sorry about the Q&As being gone this last week while I was at camp. It just wasn't able to be done because of scheduling. This week we'll be back on target. So Monday night we'll do the Q&A, and we'll go from there. I appreciate all of your patience and all the watches and all the sharing that you guys have done. Continue that. We're creeping closer to 10,000, trying to get there before the season opens. So we're on track. Thank you for everything that you've been doing for me, and I will keep spitting these things out for you guys. Thanks for your time. Hit that thumbs up if you like it, as well as all the other stuff, and I'll talk to you next time.